And we are live. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to Bigfoot Odyssey's Researchers Report. Got a special show for everybody tonight. Coming to us all the way from across the pond, our producer, Miss Daniela Aiello. Welcome, Daniela. Daniela, thank you for joining us. She'll be producing tonight. And just all the way from upstate Vermont, right there by Canada, our very own Mr. Christopher Noel. Welcome, Christopher.
Greetings, everybody. It's wonderful to be on with you this evening.
And our special guest coming to us all the way from Sequim, Washington, author of The Voices in the Wilderness and Quantum Bigfoot, Mr. Ron Morehead. Welcome, Ron.
Thank you. Good evening.
Awesome to have you. All right, before we get started, just want to remind everyone to please keep it clean in the chat. You see those blue wrenches in there. Those are moderators. They will time you out. We appreciate everybody being respectful and keeping it clean for us. If you have any questions, we're going to be taking those a little bit later on the show, and just make sure you have those all in caps for us. Thank you very much. All right, without any further ado, Christopher, take it away.
Oh, well, Mr. Ron Morehead, I have a question. Are you sick and tired of talking about the Sierra Sounds?
No, Chris, that's what I do nowadays. Since I got out of businesses, I just travel around and do conferences, and I love these broadcasts because, I don't know, it just keeps me moving. Keeps me entertained, I guess I should say. But a lot of Bigfoot stuff comes into me every day, and it's fun. Yeah. Really, it's exciting.
Well, we could do since probably 90+% of our listeners know about the Sierra recordings and have probably heard them. We could defer them for a few minutes and talk about what is the newest on your radar. I know that you recently put out a book called Quantum Bigfoot, in which you attempted to see some of the paranormal capacities of this species through the lens of quantum physics. And correct. I know it's a big bite, but could you maybe start us off with a sort of compressed 1 or 2 sentences?
It's a huge bite because it's hard to get your head around quantum physics to start with, and anybody thinks they have is because it's really the reality that's existing throughout the universe. Is quantum mechanics is what answers the questions that weren't answered by classical science. Mainstream science is still in the parameters of Newtonian physics, and that's how we were all raised, and that's what everything is supposedly measurable and repeatable and physical or material, and that's not true. Quantum physics says that there's more going on, and that's why Einstein, Bohr, Tesla, these different people got into quantum physics, because the answers to all these things lie in mathematics and not in what you can just see with our limited perception. And I say we have limited because if you get into the different dimensions that exist outside of our 3 that we live in, you find that there's more going on. You just don't see it because we're in our limited perception, and it's all because of light. And if we didn't have light, you don't see.
Yeah, I think that one prominent aspect of quantum physics that I'm able to at least minimally get my fingernails. There's not really any such thing as distance. That there's a sense in which everything is connected. I mean, if you have 2 particles that have begun their lives in kind of relationship to each other, then you can separate them by 1 billion light years, and they will still be entangled, as it's put. What in the spectrum of Sasquatch abilities kind of led you to search for a way to understand them, and led you to the quantum framework?
Well, you probably remember Al Berry. He was the investigative reporter that we took into camp, who was actually looking for a hoax and try to see who could be pulling this off on us. We're 8 miles into the wilderness in the Sierra camp, and it's a very imposing area to get into. And he said, whatever you do, you got to stay with science, because the strange thing was going on up there with different lights and different things. You hear sounds that there's no finding the source to, and I don't mean the vocalizations like we've captured on. I'm talking about. Well, we thought our camp was being torn apart. Just a sample I used a lot. We thought all the because we're inside a shelter, wrapped around this beaver's nest type thing. And we thought the thing was being tore apart, and you look out there and nothing's changed. Well, that doesn't make any sense. So they was either making us all think that because there were several of us in the shelter, that we were hearing this, or we really did hear it, and there's something else going on, another dimension or something we're hearing through. There's a portal. I didn't know anything about portals. We was all underestimating what we were dealing with at the time up there. These things were just a step ahead of us, seems like, all the time. And there's a lot of other mysteries that went on up there, and it's just trying to get the answer to them. And Al Berry said, stay with science, otherwise you're going to lose credibility. Well, that's hard to do when you got stuff that people don't understand, that they're thinking in classical science, and Newtonian physics. You got to be able to figure out how those tracks just stopped, because a lot of people claim that. And I had that happen to me, so that really woke me up. My daughter seen one. We followed the trackway, and all of a sudden it just stopped. And we looked up in the trees. We looked on the boulders. I looked over as far as I could get to just to see where it could have went. And I realized there's something going on. And it's. I think they got a way of manipulating energy, because we're all at our very minute level energy. We're vibrational frequency waves. That's what we are made of, and they are too. But if they can manipulate energy, and if they can somehow change their energy to mass and vice versa, I don't know. I really don't know the answer to this, but I think it lies in the laws of quantum physics, which is the laws that work throughout the universe, not just here, but throughout the universe and all the way through us. And when you see it in that light, you realize there's things you don't understand. I tried to ask a group of scientists one time, tell me how far it is in the universe if you think you know everything. Well, how far is it to the end of the universe?
Well, we only know what's the observable universe. We have no idea.
You don't know how far that is either. I mean, once you observe it, you can measure it, right? You think. Yeah, you're only seeing the light from it.
15 billion years worth or so, but beyond that, it could be another 15, or et cetera, et cetera.
And also, quantum physics says something else that's going to be hard for people to get their head around: is time doesn't exist as we understand it. We think there's going to be a tomorrow like there was a yesterday. Everything's in the now. And when you get into physics, and really there's books now you can read which you can kind of comprehend and get your head around, but it's hard to understand how things can't exist until you see them. And that's what quantum physics says, that we create our reality. And that's interesting. It's an interesting science. And I just encourage anybody that listens to anything I got to say to probably delve into it before you judge me, because people are so quick to judge you through their own parameters and through their own paradigms, I should say, because most people have their minds made up of what they think these things are. And once you reach out of that, you're fudging on their, you're getting out of their parameters, and they just don't want to work with you. They don't want to work and open their mind up.
That's right. Well, you're
an open mind to this stuff.
You're a particularly good person to convey the reality of some of this paranormal activity, because you are recording those voices that everybody who knows anything knows are authentic. So given that solid foundation, then you have automatic credibility to say, okay, well, orbs up in the tree line, and we saw, we heard the camp being torn apart, and then it wasn't, et cetera, et cetera. So, I mean, it's really, you're lucky to be in a position that you can't really be questioned. Well, I know, but people who really know that the voices are real have every reason to go with you and to the other stuff too.
Well, I appreciate that. I hope that's true. I do get invited to a lot of places to speak, and I like that, because I like to tell people where I think this is going, which is a long story, which we don't have to get into. But there's a reason these things are there. There's a reason they're stealthy as they are. They're bigger, stronger, very, very fast. I can tell you that from the one I saw. And it's just an amazing what their attributes they have. And I believe them to be a hybrid. They're part human. The mitochondrial DNA, which is the maternal side, will show to be human. And yet every time the geneticist finds that, they find, well, it's been contaminated. Some human touched it, so it's not real. Well, no, they got to get past that and then look at what's really going on, because now I think there's 2, maybe 3 physicists who have geneticists, who have studied this and come out with the maternal side is mostly human, if not all
So
human.
You're on board with Ketchum's findings then?
Yeah, I don't down her like science does, because I think she's been shortchanged, and she came to some conclusions from it, which they didn't agree with, and so they wouldn't accept her paper. But there's been other geneticists that have found the same thing she found, and one of them was just out in the Nepal, above in Bhutan, above their 17,000 feet. They got some eDNA, which is new, out of some tracks. They looked like bipedal tracks that they thought was probably Yeti toes and all that. So, and she came out with 99% mitochondrial human. The problem with all that is they can't match the nuclear DNA, the male counterpart. And when they can't do that out of 224 billion samples, the same thing with Ketchum's, you can't match that. They can't match it on the gene bank. And if you can't match in gene bank, it must not be existing. So they got some problems. And she went into the to the religious side, the Nepali, I want to say Nepalese. That's not it. Nephilim. Thank you very much. Yeah. But I get into the Greek mythology. It talks about the hybrids, alien beings inbreeding human women. And as long as they keep doing that, coming in and doing, you're going to find the mitochondrial is human. And that's pretty cool, really. Well, not for the woman, but it's an easy thing to understand that way, why the mitochondria would be human.
The term you just mentioned, eDNA, some of our listeners might not know what that is. It just means environmental DNA. And increasingly, we're able to just sample like water or soil or any material from the environment and pick out like 35 different species based on the DNA in that sample. And if one is an outlier that has human mitochondrial DNA, which
you there?
If we begin, then we can tell that Sasquatch is here, because if the nuclear DNA is not human,
right? Actually, no, just a little bit.
They got this out of environmental DNA out of a pond at 17,000 feet, and also from some tracks they took samples of. And it was geneticists. It was backed by National Geographic. I know some of the people over there, so I got privy to seeing the original documentation when they was making it, because there was a big crew went up into the mountains there out of Bhutan. And yet you read her paper when it's over with, and she, even though you've seen her say this to the man who was in charge of them all going up there, and then she says, this should come back 99% human, and it wasn't contaminated. So what's the other?
Who said that? Was that Ketchum also?
No, that was it's been publicized now. It's just no one's getting a hold of it because it throws them. No, it's got to be something wrong. It can't be that way, they think, because everybody's got their mind made up of what they think's going on. And really, you got to keep an open mind when you're dealing with stuff like this. But I know for a fact from my ventures into Peru and into Nepal and into these different places, Siberia, there's aliens have been here. And I think that's being more and more accepted, because now the government's come out and say they've been studying them, that for years they've released the files and stuff like that's going on. So even though we think we know everything, there's a whole lot more to learn. We got a whole lot more to do. We have to evolve further. These things, I think, have been here, and they've been given some attributes by possibly from intervention by celestial beings. I've seen this evidence of it. I've seen the skeletons of them in Peru and Bolivia. And so I know that something's been here that isn't human. And when you see that with your own eyes, you kind of got to give in a little bit and say, okay, something's going on. And then you realize that we may not be the top of the food chain, Chris. That's another one hard to buy. We think we're
What did you see in Peru that convinced you that?
Well, for one,
Celestial beings.
I seen the elongated skulls, and there's a lot of them down there. It's not just one or two. They were not cradle boarded. I went down 2 different times with 2 different scientists, and they come back with the same results. These things were naturally elongated. In fact, they found a baby inside the womb of a woman who had been buried, and it was elongated skull. So you can't cradle board that, you know, and it's an unborn child. But we unwrapped a skull down there out of mummified position, which was also elongated. And it also has no sagittal suture like we do. You know, we have a sagittal crest. I say we have, but they have a sagittal crest, but with no suture. We have 2 parietals, one on each side. They have 1, and it's elongated. They have about 30% more brain mass than we do. And yet the Incas, when they started mimicking this, they would do that with the royalty, trying to get the same attributes maybe that these pre-Inca people did, which was move these megalithic structures around with some way they did it. I think it's through sound. That's what I think is the bottom to it all, is to get on the right frequency. And this gets into quantum physics again, but you get into the right frequency, you can manipulate matter. And that gets right back into, if you want to get religious on me here, we can talk about how Christ did his miracles. He used the laws that are existing, because he said we could do what he does, yet none of us are walking on water. So we got ways to go, I think, Chris.
One little idea I'll toss in there. Just I've recently, Carrie has put me onto this notion that inbreeding can be 3 toes instead of 5. And they can also cause skull deformations, including elongated skull. So keep that in mind for a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I think dilution is I bring this up in my PowerPoint programs, is these things have been around. If they've been crossbreeding with indigenous people, that would make some of them more diluted, some of them more human-like. They are different, and I just believe that they are different, and they have possibly even different genomes. I mean, I don't think there's just been one alien race been here. I think there's been, over the eons, and I'm talking about eons of time, we've been visited a lot, and different ones have done different things. And you get into Greek mythology, you get into all. Is there a core of truth to all this mythology, or did it start from something? I believe it started with something, and things get changed over the time. But we're in a little bubble here in our life. We think that we know too much, and we don't. And I'm talking too fast, so slow me down.
What's the most recent time you've been back to the deer camp?
Say that once more.
When's the most recent?
Last year.
Oh, really?
Went up there with David Paulides.
Oh.
And he did a filming up there, Hunters, The Hunted, 411, The Hunted. Mm-hmm. I'm in that, and he wanted to, and I gave him permissions. First time I've ever taken anybody up there like that to do a filming, and they put it in the 411, the video. So it's well done. They did a real good job on that, and we had to be packed in mule horses. So, but nothing happened.
Does Scott Nelson still up there with you?
Actually, Scott was with us on that trip. Yeah, he wouldn't miss a trip like that. It's a pretty pristine area. It's a lot of fun.
Has he made?
And we were just a week or so.
Has he?
A week or so ago, I was in Denver at the premiere showing of the 411 Hunted. And Scott was there. So.
People may remember. People may remember.
Chris, you're on a bit of
a delay.
Yeah, just a little bit. Sometimes your audio will go out, and then I think you're just on a hair of a delay. Sorry, I'll try not to interject too much.
No, I could step aside and let you guys have some questions.
We've got plenty of time. We're gonna make some announcements here shortly. We've got a giveaway to do, and this is rolling smoothly. I'm actually into this right now. You guys were talking about the DNA and talking about contamination, human contamination, and this day and age, for any geneticist to say that is just completely disingenuous, because they know those peaks overlap when it's contaminated. So
It also-
for one to come on and say, well, it's contaminated, they know better these days. I'm sorry. Were you saying something, Chris? That was all I wanted to add in. You guys were just rolling along.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And anybody who is like Dr. Ketchum has washed hundreds and hundreds of times and knows how to wash them to make sure that there's not contamination. And then, as you say, when you do the analysis on the that peaks are clean and not smudged and overlapping with one another, and there is no contamination in the same. And I was just gonna.
You think?
I was just gonna harken back to to Scott Nelson 7 years ago about the phonetic alphabet of the Sasquatch language, at least as captured by Ron and Al Berry, and I'm just discussing for other samples from around North America, build upon that foundational work, that trailblazing work that he did. Do you know?
I didn't ask him that this last time. I know people, he's kind of, well, I don't want to say private, but he's not on Facebook. He's not on social media. When people want to know how to get a hold of him, I generally ask them to send me what they have. I'll send it to Scott, and Scott will either, it needs to be clean recordings, Chris. And he don't get that many, if any. And I don't know if he's anything recently or not. I'll ask him though, because I'm going to see him again shortly. We're speaking at a convention together.
Well, while Christopher's a little bit preoccupied, let's play some.
I talked to him, and he a lot of phonemes.
Chris's connection is just bad. It's really, really bad. I'm sorry, Christopher. Your maybe your internet. I don't know. While we're doing that, let's play a little bit of what I know some of the viewers came here to hear and talk about just a little bit. Danielle, do you want to put one of those up? That last one.
Yeah, just give me a second.
Yeah, Christopher, you're completely frozen now. You had it up there and it went away. All right, here we go. Let's see, which one is this?
Go ahead.
Yeah, that is. No volume on it, Daniela. Wow, we're having some serious. It was fine earlier. Apologize. Let's see if we can pull it and try another one, because it was fine just a few minutes ago.
Yeah, the volume's up on it.
Yeah, let's pull it and try another.
Okay.
Apologize for the delay, ladies and gentlemen. We did it earlier and it was beautiful. All right, let's see if this is going to work for us.
No, just give me 1 second.
No problem. No problem.
Y'all know we're always going to have technical stuff.
That's it. I'll tell you what, while we're doing that, let's do our giveaway. We on our last show, our Saturday show, we asked you guys to share the show, hit the like button, leave a comment. We ended up with 151 comments from last show. I know I put a heart by every one of them. So anybody that came in after that, you came in too late. And we have a number generator here. Downloaded.
If we can find it.
I found it. And we're going to go 0 to 151. All right. And our random number is 17. I don't know if you guys can see that. So our 17th comment was, I got to go find it. Let me count. We're counting down. I hope it's a good one. That's all I can say. All right.
I'm making sure he doesn't cheat.
17 is going to be Mr. John Nolan. And it says, I'm enjoying these researchers' reports. Well, really, everything you've done since the first episode of Bigfoot Odyssey, good job. Well, thank you, John. If you're here listening now or not, contact me. Send me an email, bigfootodyssey@gmail.com, and we'll get you hooked up with your 1 week. Get damn okay in there, 1 week food supply from my Patriot Supply. This is what it's going to look like. And I was wrong. Wrong. It is, it's
7 packs.
It's 7 meals. That's a meal a day, 1,500 calorie meals. So you can survive for 1 week on that. And there will be a link in the description for my Patriot Supply. If you use our special website, preparewithbigfoot.com, you will get 48% off of the 1 week food, the 1 month food, the emergency food supply, the survival kit, the fruit pack, the veggie pack, all that stuff's going to be in there. And also there will be a link for the paranormal gift shop, thousands or hundreds of thousands. I don't know how many they have, but a lot of novelty and gift items from UFO to ghost to Bigfoot, a lot of stuff in between. And use promo code Bigfoot Odyssey 10. That's Bigfoot Odyssey, all one word, the number 10, and get an additional 10% off your purchase. All right. Now, there will be some links in the description for the Voices in the Wilderness and Quantum Bigfoot. And those are the last 2 books Mr. Morehead has written. And you can find those at ronmorehead.com or at bigfootsounds.com. And you can also get the CDs. I do believe one of those comes with the CD. Is that correct, Ron?
Not one of those. I have 2 different CDs. They're both about 40 minutes long. One's my story. One's Al Berry's story with integrated sounds within them when we talk about it. The book itself has sound bites that goes with the context of the book. When I get to what's happening, so you hear all the story, you can hear the sound that I'm referring to on the CD. Again, though, it's all downloadable, so people can go to my website, Morehead, 1 O by the way, and download any of that. And pretty popular, really, and I'm very proud of them. And anyway,
we're gonna be getting those for sure. I know our producer of our travel show, Scott Owens, has them. He actually sent me links to those that I was going to use, but I got our producer to actually. She was going to put some of the sounds up. I don't know. Did we just quit trying, Danielle?
No, we can do it now.
Yeah, well, that's what I was hoping you would do while I was doing the announcements.
Yeah. Okay.
And again,
Just like magic.
Those links are going to be in the description for the Voices in the Wilderness, that book, Quantum Bigfoot, and the CDs. We'll have the links to ronmorehead.com and bigfootsounds.com where you can go in and purchase those. We also have Christopher Noel's literature that he sent me. These are actually autographed. Thank you very much, Christopher, if you're coming back there. Next, let's see, this is How to Find Sasquatch, a Stone Throw Away. That's next of kin. Next of kin, next door, and Mind Speak. Those links will also be in the description. And let's try this. Let's see if this is going to work now. Come on.
Okay.
Well, I'll tell you that is all too familiar for me, because when I had my encounter, and I know people may be sick of me talking about it, but I don't care. I described the sound, that tone, that tone. That's it. That's the tone. And I was looking at the one that the sound was coming out of his mouth. It wasn't that abrupt. It was just one continuous sound. I mean, there was form and syntax, like there was words, but it wasn't. It was that tone, like it belonged in The Exorcist, a movie. And, and I said it sounded demonic, and people said, "Well, do you think it was a demon?" That's not what I meant. What I meant was that it sounds like it belongs in a demon movie. That was, every time I hear it, that's the thing. That's the tone.
Well, there were two of them there that night, Gary. They were arguing. We weren't sure if they was arguing over us, who was going to eat us first, or if they were arguing over the food that we'd left out. And that's how fresh it was. This was in early '72. And we were all sitting inside the shelter with our guns ready, had they came in the shelter, because you don't know. You're hearing this right outside the shelter, 15, 20 feet away from you. And it's a little bit concerning when it first starts. Of course, it wasn't until '74 when the Scott Nelson, according to him, the sounds we recorded in '74 were slowed down. Maybe we could understand what they were saying. I don't know what they were saying, but they were asking me a question. I don't know what it was, but I was responding back to them. I got all that recorded, and I sent you one of those too. I think you can play a little bit, but it's interesting stuff. And Scott Nelson has done an amazing job. He's one of only a handful of people probably in the world that is trained so thoroughly to do this type of work. He transcribes unknown languages. He did this for the military and the Navy, for his career. He teaches languages now. He teaches Persian, Russian, Spanish. He should teach English. But that's what he does, and he don't claim to be a Bigfoot guy. He claims to be a language guy. So a regular linguist may not have much to know about something like this. It takes a special training to transcribe words, and these words that these things were having. It's very similar to what Albert Ostman said in 1924 to John Green in 1953 when he was interviewed, is they were chattering amongst themselves. These things chatter, and they're very rapid chatter, and it takes a group of words, 10 or 12 words, to make up a sapient sentence, which means something like I'm talking to you now, I hope. And it's not enough to just say they're cognizant, that's self-aware. They're definitely that. But I believe them to be sapient entities, and I've dealt with them. And I hear these professors, these different people talk around the country when I'm with them or whatever, and they just can't get their head around it being something besides just an apron around the woods. But then why haven't they found one? There's more to it than that. There's a lot more to it than that. And I think if people delve into what I'm talking about here, they would see how that's possible. I see you're back, Chris. How you doing?
Good. I had to do some troubleshooting, but I got back.
All right.
Much better connection now. Much better. And we while you were gone, we tried to sell a couple of books for you. So actually, I have the two that you sent me. With,
good. Thank you very much, Gary.
Honor special though. They have the Christopher Noel autograph in them. So I know one of them does anyway. I haven't got to the other yet. But talking about like what we just heard, you were actually heard that at the time audibly. This wasn't just like a recorder you had off in the woods. You guys were hearing this while you were in the little shelter there.
Yes. Yeah, it was a pretty interesting night. Actually, that was recorded by Alan Berry. We were all recording. We all recorded the same thing, but he had the very best quality. That's the one that went to Professor Curlin at the University of Wyoming. He did a year-long study showing that they were not manipulated. They were not speeded up, slowed down. They were made at the time of recording. There was no 60-cycle hum. It went through all the process, showing that the credibility of the tapes was there. So since then, Scott Nelson got a hold of him in 2008, and it's more recently a guy named Thinker Thunker. Now, he's not a scientist, but he did a 20-minute analysis on these sounds, and he says in our sounds there are 5 octaves in one tone. which is inhuman. We can't do that with our vocal cords. No animal on the face of this earth that he knows of can do that. And if that's true, if I can get a professor someplace in some university to study on that part right there, and that puts it way out of the ballpark, I think, because the tapes are real. We know that. There is a language involved. We know that. What does it represent? We don't know that. What were they trying to say or do with us up there, and why? We didn't know the camp was going to be that special. I mean, I didn't know, 40 years later, if I was going to be doing something like I'm doing now. But we underestimated again what these things were then. We thought, just like everybody thinks now, or a lot of people do anyway, they're just a big undiscovered ape running around the woods. But that's just not the way it is, in my opinion.
Well, I want to say one more thing, and I'll turn it back over to Christopher. And I mean, anything I have to say about this is purely anecdotal. I was hunting when it happened. What I heard, and I describe it as multiple sets of vocal cords, and it wasn't a chatter, maybe a jabber, but it was a lot slower than what we're hearing here. This was, but I'll tell anybody, it was form and syntax, but it was in that tone. It was the most unnerving thing I ever heard ever. And I was so far away from my four-wheeler. That's the thing that really got me is I thought I was going to die then, but I'll stop talking about my experience. But I can attest to that. That's a language. There's no doubt that is a language. And all right, we'll turn it back over to Christopher. We have the next one ready. So if y'all want to segue into that or whatever you got to talk about, Christopher, go right ahead.
Oh, well, let's hear the next clip.
Oh, all right. Let's do it.
Right there, just seen movement right through there.
Yeah, that was me in 2 years later, 1974. This is when they started interacting with us outside the shelter, which was very, very, the first time, very unique. Kind of exciting. It was just me and Bill McDowell, my friend. We had packed supplies in on horses and mules, and these things started popping their rocks and banging trees and doing different things. They actually was at the shelter before we got there for our long trip in, and we know that from what we discovered the next morning. But that's the night I got to see one too. It was right when you heard this. Then Scott Nelson says they were actually slowing. You notice the difference in that. The other one sound very aggressive, very unsettling. This one was more interactive, and I wish I knew what they were asking me, because that would be a very special thing for me to know. Here it is, almost 50 years later, and I'm still looking for the answers.
Did you have any electrical malfunctions in your equipment?
Oh, yes. Yeah, it wasn't that unusual for batteries to be dead, new batteries. Yeah. In fact, that happened to me in 2011, one time up there when I went up, well, I could say this, but I went up by myself.
Oh,
I shouldn't have done that, but I did. I had a guy scheduled, but Scott Nelson and I had been up there 3 times that summer, a week at a time, trying to get some more cooperative sounds and interacting. But you can't make something happen around these things. They're either going to deal with you or they're not.
Lightning struck 3 years in a row back then for you, and you can't force it.
Well, I didn't catch all that. What?
Lightning struck for you back in the early 70s, and you can't force it to repeat itself.
Well, what happened in 2011 was I was up there by myself, and it was still daylight. I went inside a little tent I'd set up because mosquitoes were so bad, and the shelter wasn't doing it then. And I heard this big crock outside, I call it in my first book, Voices Women, I call it a wooden knock, like something hit a big tree. But the more I think about that, and the more I've studied what's really went on then, I'm not sure it was just a wood knock. It was some kind of an energy sound, and it was just loud, like a gun going off right next to my tent. And I heard some chatter going on. So I sat inside the tent a little while, still daylight, went outside and started trying to talk to him, trying to coach him out so I could see what, I said, I just want to know more about you. I didn't have my gun, which was not a good sign either. But I know David said, don't ever go out there without a big gun like that. He tried to coach me several times. But he knows more about what's going on around that camp than I did at the time. Now I've seen maps on what's all the missing people, the things that's gone on, and I've heard different reports over the years. So we still don't know the intention, what these things were all about. But anyway, that night I heard nothing happened. I went out there and tried to coach him, but until 10 o'clock that night, I went back inside the tent, and I went in before 10, though, believe me, because it was dark. I want to stay out there in the dark. Just a feeling you got or something, And it was 10 o'clock that night when I heard the chatter down about 70 feet away. I say that because I know that's where our toilet was, that we took a seat up there and dug a hole, and that's what was going on down there. And then something was walking around right by my tent, a bipedal, something heavy. And it hit one of the barrels that we had stashed up there for trash. We'd hauled in on mules, and I started saying something to it, and I tried to turn my recorder on, and the battery was dead. A brand new lithium battery that I checked out earlier. It was good. All of a sudden it was dead. And that happened to Scott. Scott's lost a lot of batteries up there. He took enough batteries to start a car, I think, one time. And anyway, it's hard. You can't trick these things. And I didn't get a lot of sleep that night in 2011 after that happened, but I was wrestling around, and at 4 o'clock that morning, there was some type of electrical, metallic type sound right outside my tent.
I remember that. You told me about that.
I don't know what to think of that. I wished I could have recorded it, but I couldn't record anything because my batteries were dead. And again, it's not that unusual. Albury mentions that in his book about his battery. It was so cold up there, he said our batteries wouldn't work. Well, he laid it off to the cold. And maybe it was, but mine wasn't, because it wasn't that cold. And neither was Scott when we were up there all that summer. So who knows what they're doing. I think there's something major involved with energy. They have to have energy to do things they do. And I think it relies to the laws of quantum mechanics.
Well, it may also be, to some extent, just kind of less mysterious electromagnetic fields that they can manipulate, because they do this thing with our electronics and our batteries, and they make the hair stand up on the back of our necks and the backs of our hands, and they zap us, which I don't think is infrasound. I think it's an electrical pulse, because it creates the same symptoms as infrasound, but infrasound doesn't do that to our electronics, and it doesn't make our hair stand up, and it doesn't, you can do all sorts of things with electromagnetic energy. You can even put a sort of a field around an object, including a Sasquatch, I would think, and bend the light to distort our vision and make it seem that they're invisible when they're actually not really in a different dimension. They just bend the light around themselves. So that could be happening too.
That's very good. That's a very good thing to say, Chris. I know Warren Johnson, one of the original guys, and I ran into what we thought was a force field up there when we jumped out of our shelter. I think we're going to see this thing run away, because it was right outside there by a big tree. It had to be behind that tree, we thought. And we started walking up towards that tree, and then we both got froze. When I mentioned that to Leroy Fish, late Leroy Fish, he said, I don't want to hear about feelings. I said, we didn't fear. At that time, we thought they were not going to kill us, So we was walking up there thinking we were going to see one, because that's what we wanted to do, is get a picture of one. So that's why everybody wants to know why we didn't get a picture. Well, it's not that easy to get a picture, But we both got froze at the same time. We weren't even talking to each other. And Leroy Fish would think it was infrasound or pheromones, but pheromones only works within the same species. But now that I think they're a hybrid, maybe it could have been pheromones. But I think your suggestion there of maybe electronic.
I think they tap into it on some level, because it's very elemental, fundamental. There are only 4 known forces in the universe. There's gravity, there's the strong and weak nuclear force, and then there's the electromagnetic spectrum. So it's not as though this is some woo-woo kind of energy. It's very, very basic, and
That's all right. Yeah, people want to call me woo-woo. I don't care. If they just open their heads up a little bit and look into the science that I'm talking about, they won't say it's woo-woo. Woo-woo and quantum physics is almost on the same level.
That's
of course,
right.
I say in my book that spirituality and quantum physics are synonymous. because some people call heaven, you die and you go to heaven. Well, energy can't die, so you got to go somewhere. And of course, Stephen Hawking, they say, it can't die. It has to just change forms. Einstein said that. So we change forms when you leave this body. And anyway, I don't know where I was going with that, but it was it's interesting stuff. If they just open their minds up and start looking into what's really going on in this world and on this universe, there's things all around us we're not seeing.
I think what may feel like a hurdle to some people is that the quantum phenomena are noticeable at the subatomic level, and it's hard to sort of extrapolate to a macro level with a whole giant organism, who's not an electron or a photon.
Right. That is a problem with most people thinking. They think just because if the law is the law, and it's either going to work at the microscopic level, like you say, the very base of who we are, energy, it works out through the universe. So I asked a professor who but I won't say his name, but what he thought about quantum physics. And he said, I don't even want to talk about quantum physics, because they got to be an ape. They just got to be an ape.
Yeah.
They got to be a remnant of Gigantopithecus. Well, maybe some of them are. Maybe I think some of them are just different. In fact, I'm quite sure of that. But yeah, it's to go from the mic, because that's what I've heard hit at me a couple times. Well, that's just true in the micro world. Well, no, if it's true in the micro world, why wouldn't it be true throughout the universe? It is true throughout the universe. And you mentioned something earlier about the protons, how they can change throughout the universe, and it's just
they can be connected over an infinite.
Infinite. And the thing is, there's no delay; it's instant.
Because and that shows us the distance is an illusion, and this gets to telepathy too. I just spent a long time researching and writing this book called Mind Speak, and it seems that telepathy can also be best understood within a quantum context.
Absolutely, I call it quantum entanglement in my book, Quantum Bigfoot.
Yeah,
quantum entanglement, and we do that. There's a lot of people that are telepathic. They can, you think about the phone ringing and it's going to be a Mary, or somebody's hurt somewhere and all of a sudden the phone rings and it's Mary. Well, It's just, we have those intuitions. Yet classical science can't explain that. They can't explain how telekinesis works. They can't explain how your feelings work. Did it all evolve in us, or is there some attribute in human species that gave us those things? Are we able to do things we're not doing? I say, yes, we are. Can these things do it? Maybe they are a little more advanced than we are.
Yeah,
and that's hard for people to get their head around too. Why aren't they out here paying taxes like the rest of us?
Yeah. Some of the psychic abilities that human beings have been shown to have, even experimentally in laboratories, seem to have developed in a more concentrated and abundant fashion in Sasquatch. They're kind of our mentors in that way. They can be, if it works that way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and how come you haven't found one? That's another question we get. If they're out there, how come you haven't found them? We know how to do anything, right? Well,
right.
There's a way they hide, and I get into that in my book too.
You have the vibrational theory, and my theory is a counterpoint to that, which is just that I think they can shroud themselves in an EMF.
That's very possible. Yeah.
Bend the light, so that could be the case too. I just wish we knew more. I wish we made more progress more quickly. It's frustrating.
We will. Just because we're talking right now, we're making some progress.
Yeah, but will you and I be alive anymore when we get there?
And David, I mentioned his movie, Hunted, 411 to Hunted. There's a lady in there afterwards, her and her husband hunt, and she saw one energy, the cloaking part. I've heard this over and over throughout the years. Different people say, "Oh, I saw it disappear," And some people get alienated totally out of the Bigfoot community because they say they saw it disappear or something. Well, yes, they can, at least our eyes say they disappear, but she watched this thing for several minutes and go from one tree to another like the predator. And it's really an amazing reenactment, the way David put it together, him and this video. Good. I would encourage anybody to watch that, even though I'm in it. It's fun. And it's downloadable.
If I could interject, just I actually watched it yesterday. Someone sent a link to it, and it's really good. It's very well put together. I actually took notes on some of the filming part of it. But, you know, talking about this energy, and for a lot of people, including myself, they just have to experience it. It's just too hard for a lot of people to grasp. And Linda and I experienced it. We experienced something. This last film shoot, we felt it in 3 or 4 different places.
That
And it's
one
not,
place especially.
it's so hard to explain what you're feeling, but it's different than anywhere else we went. When we were in the woods doing the filming, we had those. It's an energized feeling. It's not comfortable. It's not a good feeling at all. It's almost like Christopher said, you know, your hair standing up all over, and your head kind of, your head's humming. That's the, I don't know why I couldn't come up with that before, but it's like a hum in your head. It's something going on there. And you know, that last episode we shot, it was inundated with the cloaking and mind speak stuff, you know. And like I said, for a lot of people, it's hard to grasp. I would tell anybody, get off your couch and go out.
You said it. If they haven't experienced it, they probably just can't buy into some of this stuff. But once they've experienced it, they're head over heels with it, and that's got a hold of them. Then they have more and more things happen, and that's just seems like this.
Well, everybody knows I'm one to walk away from everybody. I'll go walk right by myself. It doesn't bother me. But this last episode we did, there was one area that I would not even leave the group. Yeah, because I just had this feeling. So that is very unlike me. So it was definitely different. So.
Yeah, it was absolutely. We've actually let's go to the next one. Let's do that. Let's listen to this one. See what we got. Go ahead, Daniela. Thank you.
Come on. You're not very sociable tonight. Now, come on down. Okay, I'll go back there.
Yeah, we were being a little bit bold there. That was Warren Johnson, and as soon as you go out, they'll stop. But he started mimicking back the whistle. So you heard the human whistle, then you heard their whistle. Their whistle, by the way, is done with the vocal cavity, not with the lips like we do, and that's been established by science. So they can whistle through the vocal cords, and you'll hear some of our recordings, which you don't have, but where the whistle will actually turn into a language type speech and then back into a whistle. And it's just interesting vocal cords.
It kind of morphs back and forth from a whistle to speech. That's great.
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm wondering, and I kind of wonder if they don't have more than 2 vocal cords. You know, we have 2 vocal cords, humans do. If they have more, they would have all these attributes that we're talking about, how Thinker Thunker came up with all these tones in one, or all these frequencies in one tone. And even Dr. Curlin, when he did his year-long study at the University of Wyoming, he said they can be above our range, in our range, and below it. And that's in the book, Man Like Monsters on Trial, that when he wrote his paper and to give his presentation. And I think they have a very unique, very, very unique vocal mechanism, and they can do so many things.
You know those throat singers? Where are they from? Like Timor or some? I forget where they're from. Somewhere in the east, like
throat singers.
Throat singers in Asia somewhere.
Yeah, I've heard them.
2 or 3 tones at once. You know, an eyewitness, a Sasquatch eyewitness, once told me that when she heard it speaking, it sounded like it was speaking both inhaling and exhaling, and it sounded like a harmonica. So that kind of seems to relate to what you're saying about
throat singers can't get into 5 tones in one, or 5.
Yeah, two maybe.
They can do 3, I think. The highest any humans have been able to do is 3, I think. And 2 is normal. But we have 2 vocal cords. If they have multiple vocal cords, that no telling what they do with their vocal mechanism in a vibrational wave. Because I think that's how the big megalithic structures were moved in Peru. That's not just my opinion, but so it has to be done with sound vibration. Again, if you can get the right frequency, you can change matter. And that's kind of unique.
Well, they can also mimic, I mean, all sorts of things like motorcycles and chainsaws, and
Oh, yes.
they're like the lyre bird. Have you ever seen the lyre bird on YouTube? It can make the sounds like the camera shutters and chainsaws and stuff. And Sasquatch can do that too. And perhaps they can even mimic the sound of destroying trees and this stuff.
One time I thought, we're 8 miles in the wilderness. Remember, there's no trails, there's no roads, there's no, like, you can't even ride a motorcycle up there. You can't get there unless it's horseback or walk. Right outside the shelter, I heard a car door slam. Oh, okay, come on. What do you do with that? And it was in 2016 when we were up there and we saw this light, and you've seen this in the movie that Pilates put together. This bolt of light, I say bolt, it sounds like it's fast, but it was moving slow through the trees. And I call it the lightsabers in Star Wars, like the sword they use. Well, this thing, we watched it, Carrie and I did, my wife. We were up there and we seen this thing moving through the trees, controlled. And my gosh, what do you do with that? I mean, that's not normal. And we've seen other things too, but that's weird. And
well, if the electromagnetic ability to wield that energy has any validity, perhaps they can send off gatherings of electromagnetic energy, like a plasma ball. Could be the orbs, and they could perhaps, it's so speculative, but in conjunction with telepathy, they could perhaps use the orbs like drones to go look around and to survey the camp and. I remember in Ann Slate's book where she talked about you guys and your experiences, how the orbs would come around your camp, and perhaps they were watching you from a distance through the orbs.
Could be. I've heard that theory before, Chris. That's a good theory, I think, because there's information in these orbs. I've seen an orb one time. I've got a picture of it because you don't see it sometimes with your eyes, but your camera will pick it up, and it was right at the Montana Vortex, Joe Hauser's place up there in Montana, and got a picture of it, and it had a definite pattern in it, a definite something going on, and these things are intelligent; they can move. So, what is it? Is it remote viewing by something else looking at us through these orbs? Because you don't see orbs very well with our light spectrum. A camera's a light spectrum that will sometimes snap a picture of them, and that's what I got a picture of. That's pretty cool.
You saw those orbs though at the deer camp in the early 70s, right? With your eyes?
Yes, I seen a huge light. It looked like the moon was coming down real slow.
Wow.
And, it was just big blue, and it was definitely controlled. And we watched it. Bill and I did, just coming down, and lost it behind the trees. I'm not sure. What do you do with that? It's a UFO.
Right. Literally, yeah. Well, orbs used to be in the woo category, but now they're so darn commonplace in terms of people's testimonies that you just can't put it aside. Like I say, and I don't think there's any reason to go spiritual with it. I my bias is always to thoroughly investigate the known angle, like electromagnetic energy, before going to something that is off.
Well, but all that I think is spirituality. I think spirituality and quantum physics are synonymous. I do. If you look at
there are differences. Like, when you go to heaven, there's a personal God there. It's not just.
We don't know that. We don't know that.
Well, I know. I just mean it's not all synonymous. There are differences.
That's what we hope.
For some people, yeah. No, I don't think there's.
Looks like we're out of time.
She's gonna blow. Was that an alarm system?
No, we're not worried about time. We've got one more audio clip we're going to play, and then we'll take a few questions from the chat, and we'll just go from there. So we got this last one.
You trying to help this?
Yeah, that was me on a night when I was yelling back at them when they yelling at me. That's the night Bill and I got to see one moving very fast. He's seen it a different time I did. So
What kind
That's
of lighting? What kind of
What's-
light did you see it in?
Moonlight, bright moonlight. We're 8,400 feet. The elevation of the camp is 8,400 feet, and it was just moving right through the trees real fast.
Wow.
But he's seen one over by the boulders down here, and I've seen this one. And that's the famous samurai cry you hear, the samurai chatter and all that. That's the night we recorded this, and I saw what was making that sound, which was unique because all the other times they're behind a tree somewhere making these sounds, and you don't get to see them. But they've been spotted up there other times besides what I've saw. My daughter saw them 3 times, and they're just keep an open mind, everybody. That's all I got to say. Don't judge somebody and don't judge something that you don't know anything about it. So that's what I say. Study something before you judge it.
It's so remarkable. Oh, you want to go to chat? Okay.
No, I was just gonna, if you guys want to continue on, that's fine. You got something else? Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I'm reflecting on how remarkable it is that in both the cases of the Patterson film and you guys, I mean, those are parallel documentations in terms of how towering and how fundamental and foundational they have become. And it's just remarkable that over 52 years in the case of Patterson and 45 years in the case of you and Al and the others, nothing has come close. It's just, who would have predicted that because in 67 people thought, okay, now we got this. It's just a matter of months until we wrap this thing up.
That's what they thought. Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. I do believe the Patterson film is totally real. It's been studied second only to the Kennedy assassination.
Right.
And it's just, it's forensically studied, so it's real. Our sounds have been forensically studied, so it's real. They're real. You got something that talks. You got something that mobile. It's a bipedal hominid somewhere running around out there somewhere. Yet you still got these people who are in a closed box in their own paradigm. They think they have to be. They are restricted by their own parameters, by their own education. Sometimes, I used to tell somebody, here's a good one. The difference between wisdom and knowledge. Well, knowledge is knowing that a tomato is a fruit. Wisdom is knowing not to put it in a fruit salad.
That's good. That's good.
I have to feel that. Yeah, we do have a few questions. I just want to say, aside from what you guys are talking about, what you captured, Ron, which is the gold standard, obviously, and the Patterson Gimlin film, and then being so long ago, and what you hear a lot of, and I hear it all the time, in this day and age, the equipment that we have, and I actually think it's worse. I think it's worse because it's digital. And it's not, you had celluloid, what is it? Celluloid. Celluloid film and digital film, you can go 20, 30 yards out there, take a picture of your wife and know who she is, but zoom in on her face. And you're not going to be able to recognize anything. And that's the problem I think we have nowadays with the equipment we have. They are coming out with cameras and people that know how to use their equipment. We actually have our producer has a show that tries to help people with how to use their equipment and getting a good camera with a fast bit rate and something and learning how to be stable, and then hopefully that's gonna help get some better images. But I think it's worse now than it used to be, and I don't think people go out off trail as much as they used to with the Sasquatch researchers. I think that's part of the issue. But we do have a few questions from the chat. A quick shout out to Jeff Mackey. Thank you for joining us. I know you hardly ever get to join us, Jeff, and we appreciate you showing up. But I got one from Ann Burr here. It says, what does Ron think of the tractor shed vocals? I'm not even sure I know what that is.
Oh, those are Buddy Britt that have been put on MK Davis's YouTube channel. There's a lot of audio that you may have heard from the Paris, Texas situation that they had down there, and you can see those. They're back in like 2013. A whole series of videos on MK Davis's channel.
Oh yeah, Bruce.
Yeah. I unless I've personally experienced it, I just stay away from trying to chime in on other people's stuff because I don't know them. I don't know what the context was, and I know MK quite well. In fact, I was just with him at Death Valley not too long ago doing something this summer. And I've known him for years. He's a very intelligent guy, and he's done a lot of fantastic work. And there's a lot going on that I think we're right on the edge of it. I don't like to chime in on it because I don't really, like I said, I just don't know, and I don't try to judge anybody yay or nay because I wasn't there. I don't know. Scott Nelson or the professionals like that who study sounds would be the ones who should chime in on that stuff.
Awesome, awesome. We got one from Jared Indio Loco says, have you seen a dog man? And if not, how do you feel about him?
I've not seen a dog man, but again, if these things are the direct results of something celestial, intervention into the genome of different entities, who's to say what is or isn't out there? You've got Egyptian, those things you see in Egypt with the dog's head on it. You got that came from something. There's a core of truth generally to a lot of mythology, and if you look back deep enough, you find out that there's all kinds of things that have probably been messed with by interference from the cosmos. So yeah, I think they could exist. Read Skinwalker Ranch. There's a good one for you.
I have my own theories about Dog Man. I kind of think most of that is misidentification or identifying an inbred, with the traded features possibly. I don't know. To me, it seems more plausible than a half dog, half man.
Well, it very well could be, but what if just one is real?
Oh yeah.
And again, where did all this come from our history? I don't think good researchers should ignore history. I think they should look into how it started and what influenced it, what changed things. You got Native American lore, which goes way back, and they all talk about how these things live in two worlds. How does that make sense, live in two worlds? They say they hide in trees. Well, can they energize trees? That's another theory out there. There's all kinds of stuff in our history that we seem to be ignoring because we're not there, we're here. And yeah, the dog man may or may not be real, but I think there's all kinds of things that are real that we're just not seeing also. And are there portals? There's also all kinds of stuff we could talk about. It's all fun stuff, though.
The Omaha natives, they talk about dog man, or what, they don't call it that, but that's what it appears to be, is the dog man.
And to your point, Carrie, there's a lot of misidentification going on. A lot of people think they're hearing a Bigfoot when they're hearing some owl hoot or something, or they see what they call a Bigfoot when it's really a bear. Yeah, there's a lot of misidentification, but there's also some truth out there. There's a lot of people that are seeing a Bigfoot and thinking it's a bear too. So I think okay, I'm gonna call for dinner. There's a lot going on. We just need to keep pursuing, and that's what I do. That's so fun. It's exciting stuff.
Absolutely. Well, let's ask one more here. I got one. Let's do Cryptic 559 says, have you ever experienced missing time in your investigation?
Good question.
Not that I know of, but that's a good question. I know a lot of people that have, and some people have got implants in them too. I know the late Dr. Lear down in Southern California that removed 17 implants from people, and it's documented. They claim they were time missing, that they've been abducted. A lot of people claim to be abductions, and what's going on, and why is that happening? Yeah, there's more going on.
Well, excellent. Well, we're not going to hold you up anymore. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Ron Morehead, Christopher Noel, our beautiful producer, Danielle Aiello. Make sure you check out the links in the description, and you're going to find the Voices in the Wilderness, Quantum Bigfoot. The links to that's going to be ronmorehead.com, bigfootsounds.com. Also, we got Next of Kin Next Door, How to Find Sasquatch, a stone's throw away by Mr. Christopher Noel, and Mind Speak, tapping into Sasquatch and science. Those links will be in the description. Also, links for my Patriot Supply. Make sure you get your 1 week emergency food supply. Hey, get a month's worth. That stuff's good. We're actually going to be testing that out in a couple of weeks with Blue Line Bigfoot. They're going to do a whole segment. It's going to be absolutely awesome. Join Daniela, who is Danielle's going to be running the show. D. Doss is going to be hosting because we're leaving tomorrow. We are on our way to Kentucky to film episode 10 with Woodbooger Farm, and then we're going to come back through and vacate for a while in Pigeon Forge, Tennessee. So y'all are going to see me on. You might see me on. I don't know, but Danielle's going to be running the show Saturday. Who we got on Saturday, Danielle?
We've got Shane Carpenter coming on Saturday.
Shane Carpenter, awesome, and that's going to be
let's also acknowledge the fact that it's 2 a.m. where Daniela is.
It is, yeah.
That's why you're in black and white.
Yeah, that's right. It's too late for color over there.
Well, you can color in the daytime, right?
That's why she makes more money than the rest of us too. So.
You get the big bucks for this, yeah.
On the night shift.
So. Absolutely. Well, thank you, Mr. Morehead, for coming on with us here. We'd love to have you back.
Well, thanks for having me. Chris, great to see
Thank
you.
you, Rob.
Great to see you again, Ron.
Yeah.
All right, ladies and
Good
gentlemen.
dinner. Have a good dinner.
Yeah, enjoy your dinner. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Good night.
Night.